Alright, welcome back to my channel. Today, on this video, I'd like to discuss Lessing's statement about the search for truth versus possession of the truth. And what I mean by Lessing, I mean Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, the German Enlightenment philosopher, who talked about, he presented a thought experiment about the option between possessing the truth and merely possessing the pursuit after truth. And so I'll read you the statement. If God were to hold all truth in his right hand, and in his left only the steady and diligent drive for truth, albeit with the proviso that I would always and forever err in the process, and to offer me the choice, I would with all humility take the left hand and say, Father, I will take this one. The pure truth is for you alone. All right, there's the statement. So, I first encountered this saying of Lessing's, I don't know, I think years and years and years ago, I think when I was in college, and I'm in philosophy class, and I think when we heard this and read it, we were discussing it in class, people were talking about it in my class, like, basically they were sort of using the idea of it's not the destination that counts, but rather the journey. And so, it's kind of like, it's not the destination that counts, it's the friends we made along the way. And and I remember being rather irritated with the whole idea. I was like, what the heck is the point of a journey if the destination is meaningless? Or, the destination gives the journey its whole point. It's the reason why you go on a journey. And you could kind of take it, and this is not what I thought at the time, but you could use Avicenna's statement that the final cause is first in intention, but last in execution or completion. That the final cause, as opposed to the moving cause or efficient cause, the reason why you do something, your goal, is superior in the causal order or causal structure than the actual, the process by which you realize it. The process by which is always secondary to or instrumental to the conclusion. And so I was just like, it's not the journey, it's not the destination that matters, but the journey. To me, that always struck me as just a bunch of, how would I say, naive romanticism at best, or maybe not at best, but most likely naive romanticism, or a bit of almost like a way to to avoid nihilism, because a nihilist might say, what's the point of any of these goals? The goals ultimately are meaningless, and so to avoid falling into nihilism, one might say, well, it's not really the destinations that are important. Rather, it's the journeys along the way that matter. It's the friends we meet. It's the learning experiences along the way. It's the growth we undergo. And there's something to that. But it still doesn't solve the main problem that the destination, the goal, is the reason for the journey, and thus in some way, shape, or form is superior to it. And so I was kind of, I don't know what Lessing's talking about. And it kind of annoyed me, even though that's not quite what he said. He said the pursuit, or the diligent pursuit for truth, the steady and diligent drive for truth, albeit with the proviso that I would always and forever err in the process, rather than the possession of pure truth. But I didn't understand it beyond the rubrics of the journey versus the destination. Later on, many, many, many years later, maybe, I don't know, I would say probably somewhere within the last 5, 6, 7 years, I have come to have a better, I think, understanding of what Lessing was trying to get at. Or at least I have come to a conclusion based on Lessing's statement and what he was saying that I think gets at part of the truth, at least. And that is, how would I say, that he says the pure truth is only for God, the Father. That is only for God. The pure truth is for you alone. But the pursuit of truth, this steady and diligent drive for truth, even with error, is what is for humanity. Now that doesn't mean we're not gaining truth. It just means we're never just having the truth as such, all once and for all prepackaged for us, at least during this life, if you like. That's not how our minds operate. And it really makes sense if you think about the fact that we have a rational nature. Our intellect is rational. It is not intuitive. It's not like we don't understand things immediately through their essences, but rather we understand things moving from, step by step through a rational process, through either deductive, inductive, or some sort of processes, an associative process of gathering together, whatever you want to say, looking, or we move through demonstrations, through inductive arguments, empirical arguments, all sorts of compiling, trial and error, and over time we gain insight over time. And I think that what Lessing sees that I did not see when I was younger was that humanity is not constituted to simply grasp the truth as such without the search after truth, without the process, the rational process of arriving at the truth. And I would say we can see this most clearly we can see this clearly in the fact that we don't really understand something fully or completely or reliably unless we understand it through its causes or its reasons. Basically, you don't understand the destination without the journey. You don't understand the goal without the steps by which you arrive at the goal. It's like when you were in high school and you had to do your math homework and the teacher said, show your work. I don't want to just see an answer. And you could say, well, I'm not cheating. And it's like, I don't care if you're not cheating. I want to see that you understand the process by which you arrived at this answer. Because the answer by itself is, in some sense, trivial. Like, say that the answer to some equation is, 102. Okay, 102 in its own right doesn't mean anything here. It means something in this context, in as much as it is the answer to a equation that you work out the steps, you work through the process. And it could be a logical derivation, whatever the case may be. And this kind of reminds me of, in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which a book I read, ages and ages ago. A friend of mine, when I was in the Army, a friend of mine really liked it, and so I read it. I didn't like it, but it was interesting. And one thing that stuck with me was the whole thing about 42 being the answer to the question that's the meaning of life or the meaning of existence or something big. And it's kind of a joke, of course, 42, not 42 and a half. That was my friend's that he's like, yeah, 42. No, it's actually 42 and a half. But 42 is the answer. But of course, then the question is like, okay, that's great. Now we know the meaning of life or the answer to the great question of life or existence. But we don't understand it. Like, how is this the answer? And that's a great question, is how is 42, even if that is the answer and the meaning of life, or the great question, 42 what? 42 as such? 42, how does it function? Well, you have to know the problem, that 42, you have to know the problem that is the basis for the question, which is the basis for the process, to which then 42 is the answer. And we really only understand the truth of 42 here, let's say, when we understand all these things. It's like a circuit. We have to complete the whole circuit. Problem, question, And it could be hypothesis, and experimentation, or it could be insight, or what do you call it, dialectical, forming up of concepts and insights, and then doing deductions, whatever the case, whatever your process is, your argumentation, and then finally arriving at your conclusion. And then you see 42 is now, okay, maybe it was 42 other species of intelligent life in the galaxy. Well, then 42 is an immensely meaningful number. I mean, if there's 42 other intelligent animal species in this galaxy, that's that's quite meaningful. But that presupposes that we had a question to which it is the answer, and without that question, without that problem that spawned the question, and without the process by which we arrived at the causes and the chain of reasoning that we arrive at the answer is meaningless. It's not an answer, really. And so I was basically thinking about that since if it is true, we only really comprehend things when we understand them, we only comprehend truths when we understand them in light of the context in which they arise, and the causal arguments, or the arguments by which we arrived at those truths. Then we don't, unless we have that, we don't really understand, and we don't have the intellectual capacity to sort of intuit the truth as God can in Lessing's thought experiment. God can know the thing through itself. I mean, through himself, in fact. He doesn't need to go through a process. We most definitely do. And so it's not about that the destination doesn't matter. It's that the destination doesn't function for us as a destination until we've gone through the process. And so in humbly refraining from the right hand's offer of the truth as such, the pure truth, and taking the left hand's offer of the more humble, search after truth, Lessing was not opting against possession of truth, but rather opting for truth in the way that it is possible for us to have in this life. And it's kind of like, I would say, it reminds me of what Aristotle says about the types of knowledge and mastery. He talks about there's 3 types of people who know something. There are those people who have only, like book learning. And then you have the people who have only experience. And then you have people who have both book learning and experience. The people who least understand the subject or the craft at hand are the people who only have book learning. The people with only experience know more than they do, because they've butted their heads against reality, and what they know they gained through a process, and they've sort of experienced the contours of reality, the way it resists, the way it gives, and they've arrived at the problems themselves, and they've seen, oh yeah, when we run into this, we do this. Why? Well, because of that. They might not know they may not be able to abstractly formulate why these things work or why these problems arise, but they do know that these problems arise and that these things work. And they've gained this through experience. And then finally, the master, who knows best, is someone who both has that experience, who's butted their heads against reality, who understands and has a feeling for it, but who also has that study that gives them a way of conceptualizing that which they know through experience. And whereas the ones who only have book learning, they have the answer. They know it's 42, but they don't know why, because they've never really gone out and butted their heads against, they've never, got hands-on with reality and thus run into the problem themselves. And so, I don't know, I think that And of course, the master now has both of them. And so it may be the case that, Aristotle would say that, some things can be learned better than, some truths can be known more securely than Lessing was prepared to admit. I'm not sure. Aristotelian philosophy is definitely not one that does not hold to humans having that. There are only a few things that I think he would admit that we have maybe intuitive knowledge of, maybe first principles, like the principle of non-contradiction. In a way, we sort of just see that being and non-being, that that something cannot both be and not be in the same respect at the same time. That sort of thing. Hello, kitty cat. Oh, yeah. Oh, you got your snaky. Good job. Oh, wow. Yeah. But yeah. So that's my thought on Lessing's thought experiment, that if God was to hold out truth, the pure truth in one hand, and the search after the truth in the other, he would take the latter. It is not, as I had been wont to think in my younger years, and my classmates too, and my professor seemed to be pretty down with that too, so that's part of my problem. I wish my professor had said to me what I was saying now. But maybe I had to come to it myself, Maybe that's just me wishing I had been given the answer. And you see that there's a lot of things that when I was younger, I had been told the answer. I read the answer in a book. I learned it in school. Whatever. But later on, I came to understand why that is the answer. It's not sufficient for human understanding to simply know what the answer is. You have to know why the answer is the answer. And so that means you have to know what question it answers. You have to know what problem the answer to this question it makes sense of and solves. And to know the problem, you have to know something about being, about reality. And I mean, that's one of the things why Aristotle was of the opinion that and Plato too, but Aristotle lays it out really clearly, that there are certain fields of philosophy that are only really able to be taught well to people who've been around long enough to gain some experience and, learn something about the world. We can start with abstract disciplines with young people. He said like logic, mathematics, those are both really great for young people. Grammar. Those are all abstract. They can do it. They're sharp. They can pick it up quick. But things like ethical theory, physics, and metaphysics, these are far beyond the grasp of young people. And even if they're bright and they can do well in it, they are going to need to mature into what they're learning. And that's what I think I've done. I've matured into a lot of what I learned earlier. And so, yeah. So, if God were to hold all truth in his right hand and in his left only the steady and diligent drive for truth, albeit with the proviso that I would always and forever err in the process, and offer me the choice, I think I too would, for this life at least, humbly take the left hand and say, Father, I will take this one. The pure truth is for you alone. And I will have faith that in the next life, in the beatific vision, hopefully, I will have that. But that'll be through God, vision of God, who is the cause and the reason for all things. So in a sense, the answer and the context for the answer are the same thing. God is both the beginning and the end. Yeah, so thank you for listening, and I'll talk to y'all later.